What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Full Court Talk podcast, and I have a very, very special guest. If you guys don't know, his name is Ben Cruz. He's done so many things. He's done Bleacher Report. He's done Uninterrupted, like his sweatshirt says. He's worked for the Light Years podcast. If you don't know, if you're a big Warriors fan, you know Warriors World, so you've seen what he's done as he's produced that. And he's also, I think, an app developer for the app Vover. So
Yeah, I'm the head of sports programming for Vover, so we're getting that off the ground, and go check us out. We're producing daily content every day, and it's short form, so it's snackable. It's all that shareable stuff, and you get in and out.
yeah,
It's dope.
it's definitely really cool. I'm actually on it, so definitely go check it out. And thank you for being on. This is an awesome opportunity, and I'm just so excited to have you.
No, thank you for having me on, and that was a hell of an intro. So thanks for that. I really appreciate it, and excited to talk to you about everything Warriors and pods and everything else.
Yeah, but since you're a big Warriors fan, I'm a big Warriors fan. How do you feel about the Warriors so far?
Man, that's a loaded question, but I feel like they are where they were supposed to be
Yeah,
right now, right? I mean, I know everyone kind of on Warriors Twitter is coming for Kerr's head, and I understand the frustration, right? The kind of unwillingness to adjust to the current roster, and the NBA has caught up, and but I also think that once Clay went down, I mean, this is what I expected the season to be. A lot
yeah,
of ups and downs, basically a 500 team, right? When you
yeah,
look at the roster construction without Clay, and it's literally just Steph, right? The offense is so dependent on him having a good night or just playing in general. We saw this, the writing on the wall for this at the beginning, and I think for obviously Steph is one of the best players in the NBA, and I think there's that expectation, right, of you got to surround him with the best talent. I also think their cap situation wasn't helping with that, and obviously they added Oubre, but there just wasn't. Once Clay went down, all the plans I think went out the window, and you see that coming to fruition now that they are basically a 500 team, and that's who I thought that they would be at the beginning of the year, and that's who they are now.
yeah, and especially with the whole James Wiseman situation and people saying, "Oh, we should have selected Lamelo." It's like even with Lamelo, we would have been in the same situation. James
Yeah,
Wiseman barely
I
played.
I think it's too early to kind of be making those calls. And look, Lamelo, hope he gets better soon. And he's had flashes of looking really special. And obviously, you can play that game, right? Of we
Yeah,
should have done this, we should have taken him, we should have taken Edwards, or Edwards obviously gone at that point. But like, I like Wiseman's fit when he's right. I think he fits with this team. And I just think it's so early. It's so
yeah,
early, man. I mean, he just turned 20 years old. LaMelo is also just as young. And both of them are going to have to adjust, right? Like LaMelo, no one really kind of knew what to expect. Like as a rookie to come on that hot, defenses will adjust at some point, right? They're going to game plan for you. They weren't necessarily game planning for a rookie this early on, and it'll be interesting to see how he counters and adjusts, and it'll also be interesting to see how Wiseman develops. I think that's going to be a big thing as well, and big men in general just take longer to develop. So interested to see how that all shakes out with Wiseman.
yeah, and especially like everyone likes to say like he only had a handful of games, like three real games in college. So it's kind of dumb to assume that he's going to be this great player right away. He was always going to be a little bit of a project in the first like season at least.
Right. I mean, he barely played any organized basketball over the past
Yeah.
like year and change, right? And look, I mean, that's also sort of on the Warriors, right? They knew that. They knew that coming in. I just think they're in this weird middle ground that you don't want to be stuck in, right? They're in this middle ground of we want to make the playoffs, we want to win. We have Steph Curry and we should be winning. Or should we be developing James Wiseman? Should we just be running him into the ground, and kind of basically throwing him in the deep end? And they're kind of playing both sides right now, right? And you kind of see that. Obviously, with Kerr, really Kerr is always hesitant to play younger guys, right?
Yeah.
And I think his hand is being forced with Wiseman. That seems to be a call above him, and I think he's kind of made that a little clear with subtle jabs about why Wiseman is now a starter and playing more minutes. But I mean, they're after the season, like they're not going to win the championship. They're not going to win a championship. They might barely make the play-in game. They're going to have to really look at themselves in the mirror and decide, like, what is the route that we are going, right? Because if it is, and what I hope it is the route of we need to make the playoffs, like we need to try to win one more championship, like with Steph. Like Steph is a transcendent player. I understand wanting to look at Wiseman and develop him. As a Warriors fan, I'm just sick of the developing young players at this point, right? Like once you've tasted a championship and you have a special player like Steph, you got to capitalize on it. Like I know he's in the tail end of his career, but I mean, you have to capitalize on these windows because they don't come that often for most teams.
Yeah, I mean, we've been spoiled over the past 5 years with
Absolutely
just phenomenal teams. And to come to last season where we knew we were going to be bad, and then this season where there were high expectations, but with the Klay Thompson injury and all the young guys coming in, it was tough to really assume that we were even going to be a playoff team at least.
Yeah, I mean, and they had flashes where they looked decent, where you're like, oh, they might be a 6 seed, right? Yeah. And it was just it was part of the roller coaster ride that was this season, and now I think reality is setting in that I think they'll get into the play-in game, right? I think that is their reality, and they probably will get bounced early on. I mean Steph, who knows, right? He might put on a special performance and get them into a 7-game series, but it's so hard to tell right now, especially as we've seen one Steph injury and like this team is done offensively, right? Like him sitting out the past couple, or obviously he's back now, but him sitting out with that tailbone injury, the Warriors were unwatchable.
Yeah.
It was brutal. So, I mean, if he can stay healthy and keep playing, they definitely have a shot. But if any other injury or if this tailbone thing lingers or gets worse, yikes.
Yeah, because I think I saw a tweet. When Steph's on the floor, obviously they're a very good offensive team, but when he's off the floor, like the worst team in the last 5 seasons offensively.
They're a joke.
Yeah,
they're a joke. Like
it's
there's no spacing, there's no flow. Not everyone really understands that. Everyone's still trying to run the Kerr offense, right, without Steph, and there's no space to do it. And I guess that is the criticism of Kerr this year is there's not as much malleability with how he runs his offense. I mean, now they're starting to run a bit more pick and roll to kind of get Steph and Wiseman going. But, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that Kerr needs to figure out, too, is just how do you play without Steph Curry? Because he obviously doesn't play and can't play 48 minutes a night, right? That's just exhausting.
Yeah.
So that I understand that part. I don't understand or fully agree with, like, we need to change the coach or, like, fire him. And that's fine if you have that opinion.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. Who is the alternative? I just haven't seen that conversation yet of who should be the coach.
I've seen Alvin Gentry thrown around, but even then, like, Steve Kerr was so good for us for the last 5 seasons, or 7? I think he's been there for 7 seasons now.
Yep.
It's worth it to keep going with him when Klay is back, at least, to see how that goes.
Yeah, and I do think that the league has caught up, right? They have understood now what the Warriors want to run and how they do it, and Kerr needs to start throwing in those wrinkles, right? Like he has 2 coaches and mentors that he looks up to, right? Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich.
Yeah.
Obviously, Phil on his championship runs always had those great players to run the triangle, right? And I think Kerr leans more on that side as opposed to Pop, who, once Tim Duncan was kind of on the latter end of his career and he relied more on Tony Parker and Manu and Kawhi, he shifted the way that he ran the team away a little bit from Duncan because he knew that wasn't in the best interest of the team, right? He kind of changed the philosophy. So I think with the current roster construction, Kerr probably needs to lean more toward the Popovich side of this, right? And just adjust a little bit. I'm not saying like all of a sudden just run 9,000 pick and rolls a game, like the Rockets, but you do have to mix those in when you have Steph Curry and Wiseman and Draymond, who are really, really good at running it. And I understand like it's not part of his system or his preferred way of running it. He's got to sprinkle it in. And I think you're starting to see that, but we'll kind of see how it goes the rest of the way.
Yeah, but we could talk about the Warriors all day.
All day.
Let's switch gears here. How difficult was it for you to find a job after college?
Oh man. I mean, to be honest, I didn't know that I wanted to work in sports until like probably toward the end of my college career, right? And I got very, very lucky right after I graduated to get an internship, a paid internship at Bleacher Report. And that's, from there, it turned into a full-time gig. So it was tough, though. It was a lot of kind of soul-searching and figuring out, like, do I take the first job out of college just because I want that paycheck? I had a job opportunity right after college that summer, not in sports. It was for I think the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, and they offered me a full-time job, and I turned it down in exchange for this internship because I at that point I decided like I'm gonna try the sports thing. Like I'd been kind of dabbling in writing and tweeting and all that stuff, and imagined I would want to do it, and it wasn't until I took this internship that I realized like this is what I wanted to do with my career. But to answer your question, it was difficult because not only was it difficult to like get a job, it was figuring out like what do you want to do as a person, and that's probably the hardest question to answer, is answering it to yourself.
And that you talk about Bleacher Report, like what was it like just working at Bleacher Report? Because a lot of people love Bleacher Report. So what was it like?
And man, so I started working there right before they got acquired by Turner, right? So it was like within my first month, well, they were obviously in the works of being acquired by Turner, but it wasn't announced until like a month after I started there. And it was kind of cool to kind of catch that tail end of them still being a startup and kind of having that vibe, and then kind of seeing what it became and what it has become now. I mean, I still have a lot of really, really good friends who still work there and are doing incredible things, but it's been awesome to just see, like, for a while, Bleacher Report was kind of looked down upon, right? It's like, it's just lists and all this other stuff, all those negative things that people used to say. And now it's one of the best legitimate sports sites out there that people cite and use every day. Their app is incredible. I still use that every day. And, it's credit to, everything that was built before I came, and it has continued to evolve after I've left. But I'm still a big fan of everything that they're doing and rooting for them super, super hard from the sideline.
Yeah, because I mean, I still use their app every day. I use their app to catch up with the Warrior games if I'm at work. And I think I even use it above ESPN because I think ESPN has a lot of paid walls you can't even get by.
No doubt.
So Bleacher Report has done a phenomenal job, I think. But what's the best advice you could offer someone who's trying to start a podcast?
Man, I think it's just, you just got to do it. I think that's the biggest hiccup, right? Is, do people want to hear what I have to say? And I think that's the biggest holdup. And you got to get into a rhythm. And by that, I mean just consistency, right? Figuring out your cadence and then releasing on those days. That release day is huge, because with podcasts and audio, it's becomes part of people's routines. And you want to basically be scheduled listening for them. They're like, hey, their show's dropping on Thursday. Like, that's something to look forward to. I'm going to listen to it. Obviously, we're kind of in the middle of a pandemic now, so like not a whole lot of commuting or going to the gym yet, but they incorporate that into their lives. So my biggest piece of advice is, one, to just do it, just start, and start recording, get those reps in, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing with that, is just people are scared, like I don't know exactly what to say. Once you start going, like, that'll really help. And then two, be consistent. Figure out what day you're going to drop it, and just always do it on that day. And that way you as well as the listening audience getting into a habit of listening, you get into the habit of recording, and like it's something to look forward to.
Yeah, and like so far, like I've done it for almost a year, I believe, and
Yeah.
it's just a lot of fun. It's kind of like therapeutic just to talk about
Hmm.
basketball this entire time. It's been something that I look forward to every Monday
Yeah.
to record.
Yeah, and I mean, it's who doesn't like to talk? Like, if you're a sports fan, like you're always trying to find excuses to to talk about sports, right?
Yeah,
And that's sometimes where you find some of the best conversations, right? Is just with people that you might not necessarily know personally, but they start listening to you and enjoy what you have to say, and you strike up those conversations, and that's super cool as well. And it's I think it's a what makes audio and podcasting so special is just the connections that are formed from there.
yeah, definitely. But something that I've always kind of heard about working with or like around the NBA is like what sets you apart from just loving the NBA and loving basketball? What's something that sets you apart?
You know, what I believe what set me apart and kind of helped me get to where I am now is I had to find a niche within sports. Right, it's tough to be like I want to work in sports and not have a direction of, well, what specifically do you want to do? Do you want to host? Do you want to edit? Do you want to be on video? Like, all that stuff, and to get specific with it. So, I mean, when I first started at Bleacher Report, all I knew was what I wanted to do was work in sports, and like that was I was able to narrow it down as I continued my career and continued working at Bleacher Report, and then from there, I went to Uninterrupted, which was an incredible experience. I actually got hired there to do video, just work with athletes on creating dope video content. And it was just kind of a right place at the right time moment because right then, as I started, they wanted to start a podcast network too. And I was still am a huge podcast guy, right? I listened to way too many podcasts, probably for my own good. But to just be there and be the guy to help start it and then manage it, it just became kind of my calling. Not to sound all too cheesy or whatnot, but to become just like to go from just being a fan to then working in it and kind of seeing the type of content that you could create that resonates with people. I mean, that was dope. And finding that niche and trying to get as specific as you can, while remaining open-minded about it, I think is the key to thriving and kind of continuing in this space.
Yeah, and you mentioned how you worked with athletes for Uninterrupted. Who was your favorite one to work with?
Man, it'd probably be Draymond. Draymond was an awesome dude to work with. I know he's got quite the reputation on the court, but off the court, he's just a really, really good dude. I actually the last time I connected with him, sometimes you don't think professional athletes will remember you. Maybe that's just a me thing. I remember when I would work with him, like I would reintroduce myself every time. And like it was like the third or fourth time he got mad at me. Not mad. He was like, "Dude, I know who you are. It's fine." And it's you realize that like yes, these guys and girls are being approached and talked to by hundreds and hundreds of people, but at the end of the day, they're also just people, right? And they do remember you and just kind of participate in normal person activities. So that was a really cool realization. And so, yeah, to answer your question, it was definitely Draymond. Obviously, I produced his podcast, so I'm a little biased, and big fan of his as a person. But yeah, he was incredible to work with, and I miss Dre Day, the pod. But it was the one time my mom and dad actually understood what I did because Drake actually made fun of the podcast during the NBA awards when he hosted it, and it was like. It was funny because he was taking a shot at Dre, who was in the audience.
Yeah.
But it was the one time I was able to point to my mom and dad. I was like, "He's talking about the pod that I'm working on." So that was a really funny moment.
That has to be a really cool moment. Just to be even like, maybe he didn't notice you personally, but noticing something you've worked on. That's got to be an insane moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was humbling. You try to not dwell in it too much because you're just kind of looking forward, right? And you're like, hey, what's next? Like, how can we keep this thing popping off? But yeah, no, that was specifically a really funny moment and just a really cool moment that hey, you know that Dre does a podcast, and it's 6 degrees of separation type thing, which was cool.
Yeah. But so with everything you've done, because I checked out your LinkedIn and like you have a lot on there. Would you change anything about your journey to where you are now?
Man, that's a good question. I don't think so, because I learned a lot at every spot that I was at, right? And I'm forever grateful to Bleacher Report for giving me that start in this space, right? Because it's difficult to get into sports
Yeah.
at all, and to kind of get paid to talk about something that you love or just be enveloped in something that you love every day. It's really really difficult to do. So, and that obviously led me to a bunch of other places that I couldn't have imagined I'd be working at, right? Uninterrupted. Then I went to the Athletic and I was at Blue Wire for a bit, and now I'm here at Vover. So no, there's nothing I would change. I think I've taken a piece or a lesson from every spot that I've been at, and I've taken it here with me now to Vover, and it'll be things that I'll take with me throughout the rest of my career that are super important. And it's not even just the lessons too; it's the experiences, right? And just kind of being in the space, because it's kind of a whole other world, kind of when you're in it.
Yeah.
And the experiences that I've had at all these spots have been invaluable, and I wouldn't trade them in for anything.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because like you've done so much and kind of like a short span of time, but like I think you've done it all really well. Um,
I appreciate that. I try.
yeah,
There's those times where you have where you're like, do I deserve this? It's like imposter syndrome, right? Where
yeah,
you have those moments, like when I got tabbed to produce Draymond's podcast. You have that moment of, am I ready for this? Should I be doing this? And you just got to fake it till you make it type of thing, right? And now that moment, I'm glad I had that moment. I'm glad I had that moment of self-doubt because I was able to do it. I was able to do it, pretty well. Obviously, the show didn't continue because Draymond's a very busy human being, and he's a professional basketball player. But it gave me the confidence to say, like, I can work with professional athletes. I can produce a podcast that's listened to by a lot of people, and just keep building from there. Like, and I just didn't want to get. I didn't want to feel satisfied with what I was doing. Like,
yeah.
I was always chasing the next thing, and still am, to this day.
You never know. Maybe when Draymond hangs up the basketball shoes, he might tap you back and be like, "Hey, you
Yeah,
want to do
yeah,
it again?"
exactly. Yeah, just gotta wait a couple more years. I mean, he has analysts written all over him, man. Like, you
Yeah,
see him on TNT,
yeah,
and on Twitter, just breaking down. He's a student of the game, man. He just thinks the game and sees the game so different that he's going to have a media career after he hangs it up and he retires. So I can't wait. So Dre, if you're listening, I'll be available. Just hit me up.
anyone will be available. Any Warriors fan is gonna be available for Draymond.
Exactly.
If he calls, we're gonna answer.
Exactly.
Um, but what has been your favorite part of everything that you've done so far?
Man, I think it is working in podcasts because that seemed like a pipe dream, when I first started listening to podcasts, right?
Yeah,
I got into pods because of Bill Simmons, when he was at ESPN, and just what he was creating, it just seemed so different to me. It was so different from the talking head stuff you saw on ESPN at the time. It was kind of like fan oriented. It was so personal, and getting into this space has been, again, I've been in recordings and in rooms with people that I never would have imagined, like, in my entire life, and it's things that I'll remember forever. So I think being able to have been thrown into the deep end at Uninterrupted to help with the podcast space, and their network is something I'm forever grateful for. So that's been my favorite part of this journey, and obviously, I continue that work today at Vover, but to go from, again, just a consumer to someone working in it has been incredible.
yeah. I think like because I think one of the first people I ever like really listened to a podcast was the guys at No Dunks when they were the starters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
I used to listen to them all the time. I used to watch their stuff all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that's what kind of got me into it. I've talked to J.E. Skeets. He's a super nice guy.
yeah.
Um, and I think that's what got me into it, and that's what still drives me today.
Yeah, and that's awesome. To kind of have that inspiration. Everyone kind of needs it from somebody, right? Like I always used to listen to sports talk radio and never really saw myself kind of doing that, just because I don't know. It didn't fully appeal to me in terms of like, hey, I want to do that. But podcasts, for some reason, there was a casualness about it that specifically Simmons brought into the space that really lured me in, and it still stays with me to this day.
Yeah, I think it's just like the fact that you can kind of ramble on and just like do your own thing. There's not a structure to it as much as something like a radio show.
Yeah, I mean, with radio and with TV, right, you're up against the clock. You got to
Yeah.
work around commercials, and that, because obviously that's that's what pays the bills. That's what pays to allow you to talk. But with podcasts, it's obviously there's ad reads and everything else, but it's a lot more free form, and that's what I enjoy about it. It's more of a conversation as opposed to people talking at you, which I don't enjoy as much, but some people do.
Yeah. But you mentioned it earlier, the Light Years, or well, we mentioned it, the Light Years podcast. What was it like working with Sam and Andy on that?
It was a lot of fun. Those guys are awesome. They're so good at what they do, and the following that they have built is warranted. Like I think the way they engage with their most passionate listeners is something that everyone should strive to do, right? That's why they have such a loyal following. That's why they're such a big voice on Warriors Twitter and in NBA Twitter as a whole, right? Is obviously they know the game, they know the team,
Yeah.
but they don't just they don't just talk. Kind of going back to my point earlier, they don't just talk at you, right? It's like you're listening in on an incredible conversation with two Warriors fans,
Yeah.
and it's incredible. I literally was doing that as their producer, right? I would just be on mute, just listening to them have these awesome conversations, and it was just so easy to follow, right? It wasn't too heady, but at times, when they had to kind of break down the X's and O's, and they still do that today, it was also just quality content and stuff that made you a smarter fan. So they kind of ran the gamut there too, where you were entertained and you were informed. And I think those are the two biggest things that you could do in the podcast game. And that, Andy is a freaking riot. That dude is so funny. Sam equally as funny. Yeah. So it was an awesome ride to, be their producer for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because like almost every Warriors game, I'm on Twitter just looking at something, and they're always either complaining about something, talking about something, and they're always just so hilarious to follow.
Yeah, and there's a lot of NBA hoops heads out there who are very, very serious about what they do on Twitter, and that's fine, right? If that's your lane, great, keep at it. Sam and Andy don't take themselves too seriously. They like to joke around, and that's also part of their appeal. And I think that's freaking awesome because they don't pretend to know it all, but they will go out of their way to make sure you are entertained. And I think that's really admirable.
Yeah, I agree. But being at Vover, how is it just like, what is your day-to-day as a head sports programmer?
Yeah. So it's a lot of working with talent, and just kind of on the content that they're producing for the day, editing as needed, and also recruiting new hosts to be on the platform with us, right? We have a couple of insiders now who are doing great things. We have Ben Lyons, who's one of our Hoops insiders, Justine Brown, who's our other Hoops insider. We have Frank Horelia, who does a card show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So it's a lot of syncing with the talent about the content that's coming down the pipeline, and working with our social team as well. Just saying, hey, look, these are the shows that are being produced. This is a great clip. Like, could we run something on this? And start to drive people to listen. And we're a short form podcast platform, so again, you get in and out. Our shows typically range from like 5 to 10 minutes, and we strive to create content that is obviously quick and you know, snackable and shareable, but also kind of as I was saying about light years, you're entertained and you're informed as well, right? And it's just in a shorter platform, smaller platform, and I think that there's a space for it, right? We're not trying to replace long form podcasting.
Yeah.
I love long form podcasting, but we're just trying to provide an alternative to people who might not necessarily have a full hour or 30 minutes or 45 minutes to listen to some audio. But you know, audio is having a moment right now, and I think it's huge. And we just wanted to provide, you know, that service to, hey, someone's got 10 minutes while they're walking the dog. Like, here you go. You know what I mean? Here's a dope show on whatever sport you want or pop culture item, and we've got it all.
Yeah, and I think that's really smart because, you know, nowadays people don't have the best attention like span. It's getting pretty bad. But I think this is genius because it gives people something like short and snackable, like you said, to just listen to and just enjoy.
Yeah, and that's been a lot of the feedback that we've gotten, especially from guests, right? Because it's not a full hour-long commitment in their day. It's literally 5 to 10 minutes. They can get in and get out. And you know, in comparing what we're doing to video, right? You know, people are like, is there space for short form? I mean, it's like YouTube versus Netflix, right? Like, yes, there are times where I want to watch a full movie, but there are also other times where I just want to watch a quick YouTube video and, you know, keep about my day after that. Yeah. So, you know, we're just trying to provide that alternative for people.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing that you do, and I'm excited for what's ahead for Vover. But you know, I saw that you did a wrestling podcast. So what do you prefer to talk about and watch, wrestling or basketball?
Wow. So I've loved both my entire life, right? Those two sports have kind of defined my being as a human. I think I have, oh man, I think I have more fun talking about wrestling just because, especially the evolution of it, where it was kind of a joke, right? When I was a kid and you tell someone you were a wrestling fan, like, you know, it's fake, right? I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't care. And now it's become this space where people are analyzing it, breaking it down like game film, like real ESPN stuff, right? Yeah. And it's just so funny because, yeah, is it scripted? Is it planned out? Of course, but it's still entertaining to watch. And it's the one thing where I can kind of turn my brain off, right? And enjoy it as well as analyze it. With basketball, I get stressed out, man. Like, you know, watching the Warriors, you have a horse in the race, right? You're like, oh, I want them to win. You know, or you're worried about Steve Kerr's system. So there's all these things that kind of make basketball just a little bit, and sports fandom in general, just a little bit more stressful than WWE and wrestling, because also WWE, there's no off season, and in wrestling in general, there's no off season. So let's say they throw out a crappy storyline you're not a big fan of, we'll get you back next week, right? Like this year, if and when the Warriors don't win the championship, like this is a wasted year of Steph's prime, and you're like, it's such a big concept, and you're wondering, is James Wiseman going to develop? Is Clay going to return next year? When he does, is he going to be a shell of himself? Is he going to be good? And these are like real life problems that you're starting to bring into, you know, sports fan. Like the Niners, are they going to take Fields, or are they really going to draft Mac Jones? You're like really freaking out. With wrestling, like I don't take it that seriously, but I love it so much. So I guess if I had to choose, it probably would be wrestling.
Yeah, and I can totally understand that. Basketball is something I love, but it also stresses me out. Last night's game, Wiggins saved us, but it was a stressful game.
Oh yeah,
and it was great when they won, but until that point, you're just tense and
the whole time.
Yeah, you're not having fun.
Yeah.
I could totally understand that. I never got into wrestling, just because I didn't grow up around it, but
Yeah.
I can see why you'd enjoy it at least.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got into it by a fluke. It was on one summer at my cousin's house when, we were being babysat for the summer, and something about I just gravitated towards it. And obviously, it was kind of I started watching it like right before the Attitude Era and The Rock and Stone Cold were about to blow up.
Yeah.
And so like I'm a child of the Attitude Era. So that sucked me in, and it was just a situation where it was like, well, there's no turning back. Like I'm gonna be a lifer. And there were periods of my life where I fell off a little bit, but I would just always come back. And the opportunity to do Two Jabronis with a wrestling podcast with one of my best friends from Bleacher Report, Jeremy, has been just it's been so fun, right? It's so much fun.
And I think that's awesome. Just to, like, do anything with your friend.
Oh yeah,
especially with someone that you've worked with before. It's a whole new avenue that you could explore,
yeah,
at least.
yeah. No, absolutely.
But I think you've done interviews, like you've written interviews, I think with Wright, Jeremy Lin, and a couple other players. But who has been your favorite to interview?
Man, I haven't interviewed someone or I guess a professional in a really long time. I guess it was, well, to just thinking back on those Darrell Wright and Jeremy Lin interviews. I mean, D Wright, obviously seeing him now on NBC Sports Bay Area and the work he's doing, he's great. He was just such a chill dude, right?
Yeah.
Like I think when I talked to him, it was during the lockout year. I remember I flew down to Vegas to just watch the Lockout League. That's what they were calling it back then. And, D Wright was still with the team. And he was just so chill. There was no ego, right? If he wasn't on TV all the time or super tall, you probably wouldn't. He didn't have that aura of like, oh, I'm a basketball player.
Yeah.
So he was awesome to talk to and talk with. And then I guess the Jeremy Lin thing is just a little bit more memorable because so when I interviewed him, I remember it was like beginning of January I forgot the year now, but I was basically talking to his manager or somebody the morning of, and they're like, hey, we might have to cancel or push the interview because we think he's about to get cut by the Knicks, right? And it was I was like, okay. I mean, whatever you want to do, like, it's all good. And then he texted me back later. He's like, actually, he can do it now. Like, he's got 15 minutes. So I do the interview with him. Obviously, I don't mention that his managers told me he might be cut, and just kind of talking. He was such a beloved player, even though he wasn't very good at that time by Warriors fans. And then the week after, like, Linsanity happens, right? Like, he gets thrown into, he goes on that incredible run. So I'm not going to say I was responsible for that, but I'm also not going to say I wasn't responsible for that. So that was just really cool to be a part of that, where he was really uncertain about his future at that time, and to kind of see where he is now. Well, obviously he's trying to make it back into the league. He just had a nice little run in the G League, and he's doing a lot of things right now, social justice wise, which is incredible. So I'll go with Jeremy Lin to answer your question.
Can't go wrong with Jeremy Lin. As Asian American, like I'm Korean, and I think, like, I've loved what he's done, especially using his platform as an Asian American and just using it to expand everyone's knowledge. I think it's great. And I from when the Raptors beat us in 2019, he was the only bright spot for me, because seeing Jeremy Lin get a ring, I thought that was just so worth it.
He got his ring. And yeah, I mean, to your point, obviously being I'm Filipino, and it's I'm sure you're feeling this too. It's been rough, right?
Yeah.
Lately, and I think it's been rough for everyone, not just Asians or Pacific Islanders, right? It's 2020 was one of the worst years ever.
Yeah.
Just collectively, but it is, with silver lining, looking at kind of now, Jeremy Lin has been doing some incredible work, and I genuinely hope he makes it back into the league. Not only just for us as Asians to have someone to root for, but I just think he deserves it. I think he's good enough to play.
Yeah, I think a lot of Warrior fans in general were hoping that we would sign him. Then we signed Wanamaker, and that was a bummer. And then seeing Wanamaker play, it was more frustrating because we knew
Even
Jeremy
bigger
Lin.
bummer. Yeah.
Yeah, we knew Jeremy Lin had it, and he showed it in the G League. He averaged like 20-7, something like that. He had a
Yeah.
great like, span of games. Um, but what has been the most enjoyable part of working with Vover?
I think it's so we're still figuring out a lot, right, with Vover, and I think it's been a lot of fun to experiment with different shows, and we have the capability to do that because all the shows are short form, right? And you know, it's a lot of that was the biggest piece of advice I received from someone when I first took this job was to experiment and just try things, and you know, it's a little tougher to do that when you're doing full length pods, right? Because you're like,
Yeah,
damn, I just used an hour to record this show that might not work. And to do that now with like, hey, this show's 10 minutes. And if it doesn't work, it's not a big deal. I think the most fun part has been the experimentation of what's working in short form and what can we deliver, and just trying to brainstorm what else we can deliver in short form, audio anyway, that will resonate with people. I love that challenge because, you know, I come from the long form podcasting game, right? Or
yeah,
that world. And, you know, I know it makes a good long form pod or a regular pod, but short form, no one's really explored it yet. And I
yeah,
think that's super exciting for us as well.
yeah. And like I said, I think it's a great concept, and I think it's gonna do really well.
I hope
And
so.
I think so. You know, you got to be positive. I think it's gonna do well. Um,
Yeah, and we have the aspect of on the app as well, being able to engage with each other through voice too,
yeah,
right? Which is
yeah,
I think super interesting and sets us apart. So we're super excited about that, and the activity and the conversations that happen in the app are awesome as well. And you know, as of yesterday, we're finally on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. But so all our shows will also live there. But to see the conversations and the episodes also live in the app is super exciting.
yeah. I think getting to Apple and Spotify is a big jump for you guys, and I think I'm excited to see where you guys go and what the next step is.
Yeah, man, it's a lot to look forward to, long way to go, but super excited for the future and what we got cooking.
Yeah, it's gonna be really. I think it's gonna be really good. But my last question, and this is all stemming from Andrew Bogut. I'm sure you know where this is gonna go, but how do you feel about the recent Kelly Oubre rumors about him, the trade rumors about for Lonzo Ball, and the locker room comments about him not wanting to be a bench player?
I mean, I I mean, first I think Anthony Slater came out yesterday and kind of debunked that as well. I mean,
Yeah,
Oubre also did that, put a little cap comment, you know, on Instagram,
yeah,
and then again doubly confirmed by Slater. I don't know. I mean, obviously Bogues probably still has connections to the Warriors, and he might have heard that from somebody. But I mean, what was Oubre supposed to say about not wanting to be a bench player?
yeah,
Right? Like if you get paid that much money, and he's probably going to get paid a decent amount this offseason,
yeah,
whether he comes back to the Warriors or not. Like, do you want someone saying like, I'm going to be a bench player, or like, I'm good with that? Like
yeah,
Andre Iguodala came off the bench during the Warriors championship runs. He didn't want to be a bench player, right?
yeah,
He he said that Kerr had to convince him, and he said that if they didn't win, like he was going to be really, really upset.
yeah,
And that's the kind of players that you want, right? You don't want people who are just comfortable being like. And I get it. Oubre is kind of on. He's kind of in the middle there, right? Where he could be. He'd probably be a really, really good bench player,
yeah,
but he's almost like a little too. He's just a little bit too good to just be a consistent bench player. Where you're like, you could see him starting. Um, you know, so what are my thoughts on it? I mean, the fact that I would say that I trust what Slater says more
yeah,
than I do Bogut. I think Slater's really tapped in to how the Warriors are running and everything they've got going on. And so I, I don't know if Bogut put a source next to it. I don't think he did. He's never going to reveal a source, but I'm tending to lean with Oubre and Slater on this one.
yeah. And I think with Kelly Oubre, he's at that age where he's about to hit his prime.
Yep.
So it's tough for him to be like, I'm going to take a step back to win. And he's going to get paid 20 million, something like that, just to come
Yeah,
off the bench.
and I mean it's tough for I think professional athletes in general, and especially guys who come into the NBA to just accept a lesser role, especially this young, right? Like his whole life, he's probably been the best player on his team, or like one of the best players, right?
Yeah.
Going back to Kansas, going back to high school and AAU, and then all of a sudden you got to be like, I can't even crack the top 5 on like a team. You know, it's such a different mentality, and I think, you know, again, what was he supposed to say?
Yeah.
Is my question. And if he was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good being like the 7th or 8th man. Like, I don't want that guy on my team.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think, and you also have to kind of talk up your value. If he says, I'm comfortable being a bench player, you're going to get bench player money and a bench player offer.
Yeah.
So he's got to talk up his own value. And I'm sure his agent loved that answer. Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure, I'm not sure he's going to come back at this point.
Right.
But I hope he does. I think he's flipped the script a little, and I think he could be a great bench piece, but are we going to be willing to pay that much money for a bench player? Probably not, especially with our cap situation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's going to come back simply because of the role and the money that's going to be involved. Probably more the role than anything.
Yeah.
You know, because at this point, I'd rather see, or I mean, you're going to see a Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, Wiseman starting 5, right? Like that is their best 5 next year. You know, obviously, all depends on how Clay looks, but like Oubre's not starting over any of those guys, so
Yeah.
I think he's gonna look elsewhere. But and he's kind of, after that horrific start to this year, he's kind of found his stride and shown people like what he is and what he can be. And I think he's going to take the payday and the role somewhere else.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I agree. But that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming on. This was a lot of fun. And just learning more about you. I think that was the best part.
Oh yeah, no. Thanks for having me on. Always happy to chat about, you know, Warriors and podcasts and all that stuff. So anytime. Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, you always have an outstanding invitation. If you ever want to come on, just let me know and I'll hit you up.
Will
Give you
do.
topics. But like, comment, and subscribe. Check our links down below. I'm gonna be sure to put Ben's Twitter, and if he has an Instagram, I'm gonna put it there. But catch you guys in the next one.